I am joined here today for Primetime Local News with Lewis Smith from the Canada Safety Council. Now, from May 1st to May 7th is National Summer Safety Week. What is the Council wanting to bring awareness to?
Well, this year we wanted to focus on water safety for a couple of reasons. The first and foremost is, of course, with COVID, we wanted to focus specifically on activities that might be a little bit safer to do in smaller groups. Obviously, being outdoors, a great benefit to avoiding the spread, and being in the water still brings us a bit of that summertime cheer that we're all desperately needing these days. But that said, we wanted to focus in exclusively, or almost exclusively, I should say, on unintentional water entries. That's what we in the water safety industry call accidental drownings. People who end up in the water who didn't intend on being in the water and who end up suffering a fatality as a result. So we want to draw special attention into those folks. And because in a lot of cases, people will end up in the water who don't want to be in the water. So we want to make sure that that's front of mind for anyone who might find themselves in a similar situation.
And on average, how many incidents a year happen to people involving swimming and drowning in these situations?
In these situations, we don't have a concrete number year over year, but we're looking at somewhere in the vicinity of about 900 between 2008 and 2017.
Mhm.
Comparatively, we're talking about somewhere in the vicinity of 500 drownings overall every year. So 900 over a 10-year span versus 500 a year, we're probably talking in the vicinity of 90 fatalities a year.
And can you explain a bit more on how people can get in these incidents just by accident?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a couple of factors that do tend to come up fairly often in unintentional water entry. The first is that about 3/4 of people who end up dying due to unintentional water entry are alone. So they're not supervised or they don't have someone watching out for them. Oftentimes we're talking about children. So supervision, of course, is an absolutely crucial factor of this discussion. On top of that, we can also talk about how the overwhelming majority, to the tune of 81%, are men. So typically that does come with a little bit of uh, bravado or of that mentality that I don't need anyone looking out for me because I can take care of myself. When in reality, the water doesn't tend to make that distinction. It's very equal opportunity offender. And lastly, we can also talk about the cross section of folks who tend to drown just as a whole. A disproportionate amount of people who drown in Canada are either from up north, where there tends to be a lot more water and a lot more melting ice. They tend to be Indigenous, or they tend to be new Canadians. And in some cases, a cross section of all of the above.
And what tips would the council give for people in these situations for how to avoid it?
Well, the number one tip that we give is, and in fact, the main theme of our National Summer Safety Week this year is don't overlook swimming lessons. It seems like such an obvious point of discussion. I think most of us were involved in swimming lessons as children, but it's important to continue that tradition because when you're thrown into the water unexpectedly, you need to know this instinctively. It's not the kind of thing where you can stop, assess your surroundings and figure out where you're going from there. You need to be able to instinctively swim to safety. And so we recommend swimming lessons, absolutely. We've also worked with the Drowning Prevention Research Center and the Life Saving Society on this campaign. The Life Saving Society does offer a course that is specifically designed for unintentional entry in deep water. So we highly recommend that program. It's called the Swim to Survive program. Beyond that, everyday tips that we would offer include, make sure you're not going around water areas alone, especially if they're not fenced off or if there's no barricade between you and the water. It's important to have someone around who can jump in and save you if you need it. Supervision for parents with children, of course, is an absolute must. I think anyone who's been around children for any amount of time at all knows how easy it is for them to wander off or to end up suddenly and unexpectedly in a place where they're not intended to be. And last but not least, we would also recommend wearing your personal flotation device. This is so often a point of contention because the law does require that whenever you're on a boat or whenever you're on or around the water, that you have a life jacket available. At the Canada Safety Council, we suggest going a step further and making sure that you're wearing it at all times because it's not especially useful to have one in your surroundings. If something unexpected happened and you get thrown in the water, you won't necessarily have the time to find it and put it on. So we recommend wearing a life jacket at all times.
And does the council believe statistics have changed throughout the summer these past 2 years for these incidents since the pandemic has changed some things?
It's difficult to tell with drowning stats, especially. These numbers do tend to be delayed by a few years. Anecdotally, I can say that far, like I can say that we've seen fewer incidents, or
Mhm.
I've seen fewer incidents come across my desk. But as far as Canada as a whole, that will need to wait and see on the data.
Mhm. And is there anything else you'd like to add for people to know about concerning National Summer Safety Week?
I would highly encourage people to check out our website, canadasafetycouncil.org. In addition to our campaign this year on drowning safety and on water safety as a whole, we also have a whole back catalog of topics dealing with anything from heat stroke to keeping yourself hydrated.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining me again today, Louis.
My pleasure, Shelby. Thanks for having me.